The air inside the shuttered apartment felt preserved in its own quiet layer of time. A room left undisturbed for years collects a softness of dust that turns every object into a relic. And that is how the investigator stepped into it again, careful, measured, not as if entering a crime scene, but as if revisiting a memory that once shaped him down to bone and thought. The blinds remained half-tilted, the same awkward diagonal that filtered a weak winter light across the hardwood floor. He paused, letting the silence settle. Nothing moved. Not dust, not heat, not intention, just a room sealed in its final moment. Her name had been Celeste Rowan, age 31, a medical archivist known in her circle for an obsessive precision with documents and historical records. She kept time in neat lines, years printed and dated on white folders, every event logged with grace. Celeste had grown up near Nashville's old district, raised by a father who cataloged antique maps and a mother who taught piano in a quiet, suburban studio. In every note and document she handled, she preserved an understated devotion to order. Her colleagues called her meticulous. Her friends called her calm. He remembered her as quiet warmth that never demanded space, only shaped it. He stepped forward, letting the floorboards sigh their faint memory beneath his shoes. In 1994, he had walked through here with urgency. Now he walked with calculation, almost apology. That night, the night time froze. Celeste's apartment had glowed with a soft amber lamp on the desk, the one still stationed by the window now. No bulb inside, just a hollow frame of brass. He had taken note of the faint lavender scent from her linen spray back then, mixed with something metallic and electric from the old phone line. Today, the lavender remained, faded yet present, a muted echo of her sense of calm. His gloved hand drifted over the bookshelf. Medical textbooks, archival theory, a single slim poetry volume nestled between case files, The Quiet of Water. He remembered reading the title during the initial sweep, a detail so small it had vanished into paperwork, yet now it pressed forward, demanding a quieter inspection. He pulled the book free. A sheet of paper fell from inside, a photograph, sepia-toned, edges softened by time. Celeste, seated at a wooden table in an old library, eyes focused yet distant. The background showed vaults of records, rolls of catalog numbers, drawers labeled with handwritten ink. But it wasn't the image that caught him, not fully. It was the backside, a handwritten note. Truth, even in stillness, is not silent. He held the photo for a long moment, letting the room's cold fuse with the thought. Celeste had lived her life inside the order of facts, but that phrasing was not archival, not sterile. It carried weight, a personal reflection, the kind rarely spoken aloud. She had not been one for dramatic lines. This was deliberate, purposeful. He had returned to the scene today because of the phone call, the one that arrived an hour past midnight last week. Static, a clipped voice, 4 words. "You missed her file." Not a threat, not even accusatory, just calm information. The tone reminded him of Celeste herself, measured, almost gentle. He traced the words across his mind as he moved toward the cracked desk drawer. The apartment had been sealed after the case was closed, archived like one of her files, resting in the city's administrative vault. This revisit was unofficial, quiet, personal. Inside the desk drawer, the first layer revealed pencils, index cards, receipts. He lifted them methodically, no rush, no noise. Beneath the cards sat a folder wrapped in brown twine. The twine itself looked untouched. He unwound it with patience and unfolded the flap. The folder held document scans, hospital transfers, test logs, name lists Celeste had handled in her archival role. One sheet carried a red tag, not alarming, simply flagged as important. A transfer record dated September 4, 1994, addressed to Celeste Rowan as designated custodian. The listed item, audio record, internal interview A2. He paused. Audio, interview, A2. The designation meant private yet not classified, the kind processed by internal record keepers only. He checked the bottom corner, transcript unavailable, voice only. Celeste had never mentioned an audio file to him during the original inquiry. She had remained the silent epicenter of the investigation. Her life opened like these drawers. Yet this one detail had been overlooked, misfiled, or deliberately held back. The old answering machine still sat by the bed, a chunky plastic block with a narrow tape slot. He lifted it gently. Dust separated like a faint cloud. The power cord remained coiled behind it, exactly how he remembered reaching for it in the first hours after the discovery. He plugged it in. A soft hum returned to its body, like a small animal waking. The display blinked. One SAVD message. He had played messages before, cataloged them, written them into the initial log. But those tapes had been standard, neighbors calling, a dentist reminder, nothing out of place, nothing worth narrative. He pressed play. A click, then soft room tone, then a voice, Celeste's voice. If you're hearing this, there was something I could not complete. Her tone was steady. No rush, no fear. Just a woman accustomed to organizing information even in her final hours of calm routine. Look for the addendum, not the file itself. It will sound incomplete, that is because it is. The tape ended abruptly, a crisp cutoff. Not damaged, just concise like everything she touched. He sat slowly, letting the message settle like dust returning to the shelf. Addendum, not the file, something incomplete. He scanned the twined folder again and noticed, beneath the transfer sheet, a smaller sealed envelope unmarked. He opened it. Inside lay a single index card with a name written across the center. Dr. Alton Greer. No context, no department, but the name stirred faint memory. A quiet man in a lab coat stationed in Medical Records Division, always reviewing transfers, always near Celeste's station. Back then, he had provided a statement, brief, supportive, nothing remarkable, a witness to daily routine, not to any final moment. The investigator exhaled, steady, careful, no leap of assumption, only slow logic. He turned the card over. On the back, a line. Listen before you look. Not dramatic, not emotional, just Celeste instructing him in the silent language of her work. He rose, crossed to the window, and adjusted the blind. Afternoon light spilled across the apartment, revealing dust like light snow. The lavender scent now intertwined with old paper. He checked the answering machine again, rewound the tape manually. Then he noticed a switch he hadn't seen before, a narrow secondary button on the side labeled A2. The transferred document had used that same code. He pressed it. The tape clicked and a second recording began, quieter than the first. Different voice, male, controlled. I logged the interview according to her request. She said the record must remain oral, no transcript, no duplication. The voice paused, breath barely audible. She believed someone had altered records, not for harm, for concealment of a procedural decision. She thought truth should be stored, not erased. Silence then. She trusted administrative process more than people, including me. The tape ended. He stood very still. No rush, no jolt, just calculation. A2 hadn't been a file Celeste possessed. It had been a record of her final professional concern, not dramatic, not cinematic, just procedural, a detail she could not let dissolve. Dr. Greer had not mentioned the recording. Celeste had not documented it. He had not searched for it. Not missing by accident, missing by design, a quiet design. He looked again at her photograph. Celeste in the library stacks, eyes serene. Truth, even in stillness, is not silent. The twist was not a revelation of a grand act, not a withheld confession. It was something far smaller, more devastating in its simplicity. Celeste had spent her final day not in fear, not in distress, but in the simple duty of preserving accuracy. Her life had ended before she could finish an addendum, a simple professional correction, a quiet footnote, a truth that mattered only because she believed all truths should be preserved, even the smallest. The room had long ago been cleared, dusted, processed, but he had never truly returned to listen. He shut the machine off. The lavender scent remained. Justice, even mechanical, had been served through protocol and closure. Yet something human lingered, a woman who believed order could outlast silence. He spoke barely above a whisper, not to her, not to the room, but to the unfinished thread in the air. "I hear you now." The room stayed still, suspended in 1994 calm. Nothing resolved, yet everything quietly understood. He stayed in the apartment longer than procedure would consider necessary, but this visit was beyond procedure. He was not here to reopen anything, not to overturn decisions, not to extract closure from a space already sealed by time. He was here because Celeste's voice, no longer present except in magnetic tape hum, had pulled him back with quiet instruction. She had not asked for justice, only accuracy, the foundation she lived by. He lowered himself into the wooden chair by the desk. The wood creaked with a soft, familiar complaint, the same acoustics from years earlier. He could almost feel the ghost of her posture. Back straight, hair collected neatly, fingertips moving across pages with gentle but absolute certainty. Celeste had been the sort of person who made space feel orderly without enforcing it. Her presence had been an atmosphere, not an imposition. He opened the brown wine folder again. Beneath the hospital transfer sheets lay another divider labeled simply, "Pending," a category that implied continuation, not conclusion. Inside, a typed memo addressed to the records director. Adjustment request filed. To be logged and reviewed upon confirmation. Please retain verification copy. No handwritten notes. No urgency. Just the quiet expectation of administrative rhythm. He studied the timestamp. September 5, 1994, 4:22 p.m. That had been the last documented activity associated with Celeste before silence entered the chronology. He turned the memo over and noticed faint indentation on the back, impressions left from writing on the sheet above it at some earlier time. He tilted it toward the slanted window light. Words surfaced like submerged fossils. "I trust the standard process." Not a plea, not a coded message. A statement of belief, her belief in order, in systems, in collective human accuracy. He rose and crossed to the kitchen area. The apartment's stillness remained unbroken, the air filled with lavender and wood fiber. The refrigerator door, when opened, released stale cold mixed with cardboard scent. Inside were only a few glass jars, long emptied and cleaned before the apartment was sealed. Celeste had not left disorder, not even in farewell. He noticed a magnet on the metal door, a simple square with a printed line. "Everything cataloged can be found." He pressed it gently, letting his thumb rest on the cool enamel. The quote fit Celeste more than any photograph could. He turned, studying the dining table, the slim rectangular workspace where she had likely sorted documents late into evenings. Amid the calm arrangement rested one item that broke symmetry, a slender cassette box, translucent, labeled A2, secondary in her small handwriting. He paused. The phone message had referenced listening before looking. He followed that instruction with quiet precision. He retrieved a small cassette player from his bag, connected fresh batteries, and slid the tape into place. A soft click. Static eased out, followed by an unfamiliar voice, not Celeste, not Dr. Greer. A third speaker, deliberate in tone. The revision was not for secrecy. The adjustment clarified a procedural timeline, ensuring correct archival lineage. Pause, paper rustle. Celeste believed the original record incorrectly listed custodianship dates. She filed standard amendment, nothing more. A faint exhale then. She asked that the review remain private to avoid informal speculation. She respected the written process above all. The recording finished with soft table noise, then silence. The investigator let the tape spin to its empty end before clicking stop. He sat back again, letting thoughts settle into the room's warm quiet. The twist in this case, the center of years of quiet questions, had never been a missing file, a concealed confession, a hidden exchange. It had only been a date, a correction, a procedural footnote Celeste had attempted to adjust before time closed around her. Not scandal, not secret, simply the accuracy she dedicated her life to. He opened his notebook, not to rewrite history or revise any conclusion, but to understand the fine architecture of her final task. He took in the details with clinical composure. A2 interview audio. Dr. Alton Greer's secondary involvement. Addendum pending review. Revision request September 5, 4:22 p.m. No emotional embellishment, just facts arranged with respect. He rose and explored the apartment again, slower this time. The hallway felt narrower than memory had captured, the walls lined with framed botanical prints, pressed leaves, numbered specimens, tidy Latin labels. Even her art bore the imprint of cataloging. In her bedroom, the bed remained as it had been left during the initial investigation. Linen smooth, pillow centered, quilt folded once at the end. A small nightstand held a lamp, a glass of water evaporated into faint residue, and a tiny pocket notebook. He opened the notebook. Only 3 pages held writing. 1. Verify sequence before signing. 2. Clarity is responsibility. 3. Truth is not dramatic. The third line pulled him deeper than any revelation could. Celeste had not seen truth as climax or confession, but as quiet maintenance of order. She corrected records because integrity required it, not because she sought recognition or narrative. He set the notebook down lightly, as though returning it to her hands. The afternoon light shifted. Dust continued its peaceful drift through the window beams, unhurried and unobserved. Outside, the city existed with its usual tempo, unaware of the small act of archival devotion that had defined a woman's final hours. He returned to the living room. The answering machine sat silent now, its single blink gone. The recorder's internal tape had given all it could. He unplugged it gently, coiled the cord, and set it back exactly where it had rested for decades. He did not take evidence. There was no new case, no reopened inquiry. He only restored the room to its natural stillness. On the desk, he placed the photo upright, Celeste at the library desk, gaze distant but present, truth in stillness. He stepped away from the apartment window, letting the blinds fall back into their half-tilted pose. The light resumed its diagonal path, unchanged by his return. In the corridor outside, he paused before pulling the door closed. The hallway light buzzed with faint electric hum, a contrast to the preserved quiet he was leaving behind. He reflected without sentiment, only precision. Celeste had lived in alignment with her work. Accuracy was her way of honoring life. Even the smallest correction required completion. Her voice, preserved through tape hum and clinical calm, had not carried distress, only dedication. He closed the door with slow, respectful motion. The latch clicked, sealing the apartment once more in its suspended year. As he walked down the stairwell, his steps echoed without urgency. The building exhaled with old wood and quiet memory. Each floor he descended returned him to present time, to a world that had continued regardless of Celeste's final act of order. Outside, evening approached. The January air held a crisp neutrality, neither warm nor cold. The city lights flickered on in sequence, like archival codes assigned to street corners and windows. He stood at the curb, paused, and folded the small index card with Dr. Greer's name into his coat pocket. Not to pursue, not to question. The narrative had already completed itself with logic, not complication. He understood now. Justice is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is simply the completion of a notation, the acknowledgement of unfinished documentation, the recognition of a quiet voice preserved by electromagnetic tape. Celeste had trusted standard process. In the end, the process had remembered her in its own way. He stepped forward, blending into the rhythm of passing pedestrians. The city did not know the weight he carried, and it did not need to. A truth corrected is a life honored. No closure was required beyond that. 2 days later, he returned to the archives building where Celeste had worked. Not as investigator, not as authority, but as a quiet observer of her domain. The building itself was constructed like a vault, concrete, narrow windows, corridors that dampened sound and held every footstep in gentle suspension. Here, silence was not absence but structure. He signed the visitor ledger, the pen dragging slightly on aged paper. The clerk, an older man with steady hands, nodded him through without unnecessary conversation. Words were rare currency in a building like this. Everything that mattered existed in written timeline rather than spoken air. He walked slowly across the rows of shelving units. Each section bore numerical stamping, each drawer labeled with crisp codes. A17, B40, C92. Celeste had once navigated these corridors daily, aligning the city's medical records into a coherent sequence only she seemed to fully comprehend. He stopped at section A2. The designation had appeared many times over the past days, on her transfer file, on the audio cassette, on the machine switch. This was the core of what she had been correcting. Not mystery, not secrecy, but organizational lineage. He pulled the drawer open. The metal slid with quiet resistance, the sound small and methodical. Inside, pristine files were aligned in careful succession. He traced the tabs with gloved fingertips. A201, A202, A203, A204. Her handwriting marked the fourth in pencil, steady, almost gentle. This was hers, not dramatic, not coded, just professional continuity. He removed the folder. It was light, containing only 2 sheets, the original custodianship record and Celeste's typed amendment request. Nothing radical, nothing scandalous. Only a date adjustment shifting the official transfer by 48 hours, an issue of accuracy, not implication. He sat on the nearby steel bench, the folder resting across his knees. He read both sheets again, slowly, carefully, absorbing their plainness. This, then, had been the heartbeat of her final effort. Not a grand revelation, not a hidden narrative, a correction that would ensure future records aligned without distortion. He folded the amendment back into its slot and returned the folder to the drawer. The metal drawer closed with a soft finality, one that did not erase her task but honored it. As he turned to leave, he noticed a slim drawer beneath the main shelf, smaller, marked Addenda logs. He opened it. Inside lay a bound ledger, leather cracked at the spine, pages filled with decades of corrections by countless archivists. He scanned the entries. Line after line of small clarifications, dates amended, names spelled correctly, signatures updated, nothing dramatic, everything essential. Then he found her last entry. Rowan C. A2 adjustment request, filed pending review. No flourish, no personal notation, not even her initials beside it. She had followed form until the final moment. He stood, letting the ledger rest where it belonged. There was no need to interfere with a system she trusted. Outside, the afternoon light sharpened along the pavement. The building behind him remained calm, its windows quiet with stored decades of human detail. He walked toward the river district, where winter wind moved across the water without urgency. Celeste had liked to walk there after long shifts. Colleagues had mentioned it in their original statements. She would sit at the bench near the pedestrian footbridge, watching water pass beneath in even rhythm. He found the bench still there, metal worn but intact. He sat, not to reflect romantically, but to align the final pieces of her existence in calm order. She had not chased resolution of her life. She had only chased precision in her work. Her final recordings, her final notes, her final hours, all centered on sustaining integrity of record. For a long minute, he listened to the sound of river movement. No narrative swelled, no emotional surge broke through, only the steady hum of water against stone. In that neutrality rested Celeste's legacy. He reached into his coat pocket and removed the index card with Dr. Greer's name. He stared at it not with suspicion but clarity. Greer had not hidden anything monumental. He had only followed her request for oral logging until it could be reviewed. No conspiracy, no betrayal, just administrative obedience. He tore the card in half quietly, not out of erasure, but release. Her work was complete, even if the amendment itself had never been filed to finished status. He let the pieces rest in his palm before discarding them into a nearby waste bin. They fluttered once, then settled without spectacle. As dusk smoothed across the city, he returned to his car. A tape lay on the passenger seat, the secondary recording. He held it a moment, aware of its fragility. He did not destroy it. He did not catalog it. He simply placed it in the glove compartment where it would remain, not evidence, not memory, just untouched truth stored exactly as it existed. Truth, even small truth, deserved storage. He turned the ignition. The engine responded with steady hum. Driving through Nashville at blue hour felt like moving through a held breath. Streetlights flickered on, forming neat intervals of illumination like Celeste's life, consistent, modest, and methodical. A traffic signal blinked red at the main intersection. He waited, motionless behind the line. A pedestrian crossed, coat collar lifted against the wind, footsteps soft but audible. The investigator watched the rhythm of it, human movement guided by quiet order. When the light turned green, he proceeded. There was no dramatic belonging to this conclusion. No confession tape, no long-withheld name, no triumphant revelation. What had endured was not a solved case, but a restored detail. Sometimes the weight of existence is not in story, but in structure. The phone call that drew him back, "You missed her file," had not been accusation. It had been reminder. A voice honoring Celeste's final intention, completion of a footnote. He thought of her apartment of lavender and dust, of blinds frozen in diagonal light. The hush of preserved time lingered at the edge of memory, not haunting, simply present. Justice, in the formal sense, had been served long ago. Yet something deeper had resolved, not publicly, not ceremonially, but privately within the quiet architecture of truth. He parked along the river once more, engine ticking as it cooled. He stepped out, stood at the railing, and let evening air filter through the cadence of water. This was not closure. Closure implied finality, a sealed narrative. This was continuation, a truth corrected and allowed to rest. He looked into the slow current, the reflection of street lamps trembling across its movement. Celeste had believed order could outlast silence. She was right. He spoke softly, almost thought rather than voice, without sentiment or dramatization. Accuracy endures. Nothing echoed back. The river did not answer. The city did not shift. Yet something human, something faint and unspoken, remained. Not resolution. Just quiet, rightful alignment.